Another week, another outstanding guest here on the IGN Podcast Unlocked. It's Jake Solomon, lead designer at Firaxis Games on XCOM Enemy Unknown. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thrilled to be here. Thrilled to be here. Don't oversell me, though. Outstanding is maybe reaching too far, but I'll try. I'll try to live up to those lofty expectations.
Well, the game you're working on looks pretty outstanding. It's a a game that people have been crying out for only about 20 years or so.
Yeah, we're very prompt in our responses.
So, of course, XCOM, some of our listeners may not even be old enough to know what XCOM is. It is an alien invasion strategy game, or at least it was.
Yes. It's people are being taken from around the world. It starts slowly, but it's a full-scale worldwide invasion, and the player is the one responsible for stopping it. And so, of course, they take on the role of all the individual soldiers and the big boss back at the base. So it's sort of a very, very large scope game.
Now, Jake, strategy games, particularly, we're talking about the Xbox version in particular with my audience here, because of course it's coming out on PC as well. But strategy games tend to make console gamers twitch involuntarily. Something about them
makes them nervous.
I don't know why that is, but how do you counter that? Because you certainly, you can't turn a blind eye to it. You know it exists.
No, absolutely right. I mean, look, I'm a 360 gamer and a strategy gamer, so I know the feeling. And I think what it is that there aren't many of them because it's hard to do, and typically that's because it's real-time strategy. If you try to make a real-time strategy game on a console, you're going to have a hard time, as they say. I think that because XCOM is turn-based, it makes it really, really easy to play. And so, you have complete control. You can take the time you want to control each one of your soldiers. And turn-based has a pretty good legacy on consoles, disguised in RPGs or JRPGs.
Right.
There are a lot of turn-based mechanics. But, strategy, it hasn't found a big home on the 360. But that's not, I don't know, for me, probably because I'm an idiot, but I find that exciting. I don't find that daunting so much as I do exciting. And I'm a huge 360 gamer, so I definitely understand where people are coming from. But we've been playing on the 360 controller for years and years and years. We worked really, really hard to make sure that feels natural and smooth, and we're really proud of that.
Well, I'm surprised when you were listing a couple of examples and console strategy history, you didn't mention your own game, Civilization Revolution.
That's a dark time for me, Ryan, and I'd appreciate you not to bring that up. No, you're right. I didn't mention the game I worked on. So, right, Civilization Revolution.
I'm curious what heading into XCOM, what lessons did you take? Both good and bad. What lessons did you take from doing an Xbox 360 version of Civilization?
Well, Civ, and Civ Rev, as we call it, Civ Rev. I think that was an interesting game. It did really well, and it was great. What we set out to do with Civ Rev was to sort of take the Civilization experience, which is this very big, complex strategy game, and sort of present a sort of really short, tight Civ experience. Like a 3-hour game, 4-hour game. But with XCOM, what we're set out to do is make a full-blown, 20-plus hour experience. And so there were some things we learned, doing Civ Rev, just sort of, just getting familiar with the ins and outs of the system, obviously, and hardware. Some gamepad stuff, some input stuff, but really the games are kind of different because XCOM's meant to be this, it's tactical combat. It's got these RPG elements. So gameplay-wise, it's pretty different from Civ Rev, but at least system-wise, it was nice to get that experience.
Well, how about kind of on a similar note? So, what, in your opinion, because you're dealing with an Xbox crowd that doesn't really know what XCOM is, except other than that it's a first-person shooter that doesn't seem to ever want to release. But
I'm gonna let that one go, man. I'm gonna let that one go.
But in all seriousness, what in your opinion makes XCOM XCOM?
Well, what makes it XCOM, and it's the same thing that makes it special, is the fact that it's a game with consequences. If I'm going to sum it all up in a word, it's a game with real consequences. I think the most startling thing for people when they learn about the game is that you have these soldiers, right? And you play with them and you level them up, and they have all these different class abilities, and you can play with them for 10, 15, 20 hours. But they are all vulnerable, and if they die on the battlefield in XCOM, they're dead, and they're not coming back.
Right.
And so that's one of those, I suppose, I don't know. There are very few games that have consequences like that, and so that's one of the things that makes it special is that you really, really get invested in the game, and you have this very high tension when you're playing because these soldiers that you've been working on, they are very vulnerable, and those types of consequences, which they make the game very tense, but they also really, when you succeed at the game, you've succeeded against real odds, and that just, it's this really unique experience for people, and that's what I love about the original, and I think that's what makes it matter still 20 years later, and it is. I mean, it's different. It's a very different experience as a single-player game. It's challenging. It's hard. It's got these really high stakes to it. But when we decided to remake it, that was something where I said, like, we're not going to change that. That's sort of what makes XCOM important. And so we held on to it, and it's fun to see that we still get the same experiences playing XCOM Enemy Unknown as we did playing the original all those long years ago.
How do you walk the line, Jake, for PC gamers who want something that's true to the original and yet designed for current day market realities, which is my thinly veiled term for consoles?
Well, I mean, it helps that we're all console gamers, but we had our roots with the original game, and so we feel like we know what's important with that game, and we're certainly. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's a religious icon around here, but if I had a god, it would be XCOM. But we don't want to change what made the original special. We're not afraid of challenge, and we're not trying to cater to some mythical gamer that we don't understand. We're trying to make a game that we think is fun and gripping and still true to the original. And our hope is that the magic in that game, I mean, the reason that people still talk about it 20 years later, and there are a lot of games from that era that, most of the games from there, the vast majority, have disappeared.
Sure.
And nobody worries about them anymore, but XCOM's special, and you can't tinker with that. You can't be too arrogant to tinker with that and think, oh, I'm gonna go out and make a new classic. Instead, we want to focus on what made the original so special, and we know that magic still exists, but at the same time, the industry's changed over the last 20 years. There are a lot of things that have changed. Adding a narrative to the game doesn't hurt the original game. It expands it. Making sure that players are introduced at a fair pace to the game. Having again a really good tutorial. Nobody likes tutorials, but working in sort of like teaching the player as they play, making it fun, adding a narrative to it, and making sure, of course, that it works on the 360 controller thing.
So, is a game like this in some ways a no-win situation? Like, can you even win with the fans of the original, or do you just kind of go out and make the best game you can and not even worry about that stuff?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not going to compare myself to Peter Jackson because I'm an idiot and he's a genius, but it's probably similar to, and not just games are like this, books are like this, lots of entertainment media are like this. When you try to revive something or bring back something that is so beloved, can you please everyone who loved the original? I don't think so. But I do think that you still have to, you have to acknowledge that the only reason I'm sitting here 20 years later making XCOM is because it matters so much to people. Because I sort of view it as like my team and we have a pretty big ownership stake in the game, but fans of the original have as big, if not bigger, of a stake of ownership in the game because, without them, this is not a project that would happen. So you do worry about it. I mean, I think you do. I certainly worry about, how people are going to respond to it. But now that it's almost done, it's been nothing, the reaction's been nothing but positive internally and externally with the focus testing we've done, with original fans and with new fans to it. And so now it's sort of like an exciting moment where you think, well, I don't know, is it a no-win, or is it kind of like, I don't know, maybe you shoot the moon and you try to please everyone? I don't know.
Well, tell me, here's a pie in the sky one for you. Would you ever consider making a new XCOM strategy game in the original style, graphics and all? We've seen a little bit of that lately with the whole Kickstarter thing, and even if it's like a Facebook game, does that thought ever cross the studio's mind? Like, hey, let's do this in the original style and just make it run and make a new game in the old style and make it run in modern day monitor resolutions.
I mean, I think that I think the only appeal there would be the fact that you could make something for different platforms like mobile or, as you say, browser-based or something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, again, I totally respect guys doing that, but for me, I am like a very modern gamer. So I just think that when I played the original, I mean, I think that your daydreams were about making the game. What if it looked even better? What if it was in 3D? What if you could get up close and see your soldiers? What if you could, see the aliens ripping your guys apart? I mean, so for me, my dream has always been to take this and make a modern version of it. And so I don't know. I'm really I'm sort of like I'm a big AAA gamer, and so for me, being able to do this to an original game is sort of the dream.
Well, speaking of AAA, there is another XCOM game, of course, as I jokingly mentioned earlier. The game simply titled XCOM, the first-person shooter.
Right.
How is it that your game has been both announced and is being released within the time frame of within the window of the first-person shooter, and we still haven't got that game? How long have you guys been on this?
It's because we're quick. We're lean and mean. Now so both teams have known about each other forever. So actually, our game has been in development for, at this point, 4.5 years, if you can believe that. So it's been, when you're making a new game, obviously we're remaking a game that's 20 years old, but for us, this is an entirely new game and hopefully a new franchise. And when you do that, you need a lot of time to make a lot of mistakes, to mess up, to fail, and then find the right way forward. And so, we needed every last day of the 4.5 years we've been given. And so we've been in development for a really long time. And during that time, both teams have known about each other, and we've been talking back and forth for years. And Jordan and the guys at Marin, we've known about each other, and you're kind of in your bubble before either game gets announced.
True.
You're just, we talk back and forth. They say, "Oh, this is what we're doing," and we say, "Oh, this is what we're doing." "Oh, that's cool." We trade, trade builds, and so then for us, we've just sort of been on our own path, and then for them, they're on their own path, and when things get released, that's all up to the publisher. But for us, like both teams, we've known about each other forever, so I know I'm sure it looked strange from the outside, but internally, we've both been in development for about the same amount of time.
Well, if you guys are trading builds back and forth, that's pretty interesting and actually very cool on a something that you can both do under the 2K umbrella. Have there been any neat little ideas that have come up that you've seen in their game, in builds that you've somehow worked into yours?
Yes, there have, and in fact, that's something we want to leave to the players. But I promise that, and once they play, they'll see. Like, we've definitely tried to make links to each other's games because we're both fans of the original, and obviously it makes sense for us to try and make some cool narrative links between our two games. So yeah, we've definitely done that.
Now, I just got one more question on this. I mean, I don't want to make this too much about the other XCOM game, but it is a unique situation, just given it's extremely rare that we see a franchise come back from the dead, or I guess in XCOM's case, back from the deep, in two forms. Yeah, you see what I did there?
Yeah.
But it's real rare that we see a franchise return in two genres like this virtually simultaneously. So what I'm genuinely curious of is how do you avoid confusion with the first-person shooter? How do you avoid keeping your game as the strategy game, and are people going to go to the store thinking this is going to be that they're buying the first-person shooter?
Well, that's fine. bad for us, isn't it? It's only a problem for those guys. No, I mean it's a fair question. It's but I say that jokingly, but it is kind of true. I mean, obviously being the first one out the door makes it a little bit easier, but yeah, I mean it's a fair question. I mean, I think that what we're trying to do is the benefit there is that the brand stuff is way over my head in terms of how they're managing brand and things like that. But we are making two pretty different experiences.
Sure.
We're both on all the different platforms, but obviously ours is more of a tactical game. Ours is modern day. Ours is probably hews a lot closer to the original in terms of narrative and the aliens and things like that. Theirs obviously set in the 60s, and they're telling a completely different story of XCOM. So I think that it's kind of nice, at least as a fan of XCOM, to have the whole franchise be dark for almost 15, 20 years, and then all of a sudden you get all this great XCOM goodness one on top of each other. But yeah, I mean, managing the brand it's tricky. I mean, it's definitely something that I think that's a challenge, and luckily, as I say, that I leave that to smarter people than me. My hope is that we make the best game we can, and hopefully people will respond.
Now, you mentioned that you've been working on this for about 4.5 years. That is an exceptionally long time.
Oh yeah.
Now, and 2K, to their credit, they've always been a publisher that's not been afraid to delay their games and give their developers more time to make the best product possible. So, I guess the natural follow-up question to this would be, in the 4.5 years, have there been substantial design changes? Or is there some point along the way? Because most games these days are 2, maybe 3 years tops. I think it's fair to say on average, at least from what the consumer guys like us hear about. So has this game, is the game that we're about to get in October drastically different than what you originally began working on?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, and I say this as the guy who made most of those mistakes. I mean. And it's something that internally and just personally, I believe in failure and making mistakes as a part of the creative process. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to say that because I'm a designer, and that turns out to be sometimes a nightmare for my team. But yeah, I mean, over the course of time, I made some pretty big changes to the combat design, the strategy design, all elements of the game where. We started out trying to make something that was really close to the original game. But then, after we got pretty far with that, maybe about a year in, there were some comments where people who loved the original game were like, perfect, you've just made the original game, this is exactly what we wanted. But, we started thinking, is this actually the game? Is this really the game that we would set out to make if we weren't so in love with that original game? And so we took some time, and I went back and made a whole new prototype, which internally we called Combat 2.0 because we're really original, and and that was a very, very different take on combat, and that is much closer to what people are going to see, and it's a big improvement, but it's sort of the way we work here. Is we're very iterative, and we're not afraid of failure, and certainly when you have a guy like me designing who fails on a daily basis, it's a good thing because we sort of just say, okay, if our ultimate goal is to make the best game, we don't mind at any point saying like, all right, well then we're gonna throw things out, we're gonna start over, we're gonna change things, and certainly that was a part of our process over the last couple of years. But part of that too was the fact that this game has environmental destruction and 3D fog of war and a lot of really technical things that still a lot of games don't do, and so those things required a lot of time to bake as well.
Are you afraid that you just pissed off a whole legion of dedicated original XCOM fans by admitting on the air that your original version of the game played almost exactly like the original?
That was your plan, wasn't it, Ryan?
I'm just trying to get a good interview. That's my plan.
You son of a... Yeah, no, I mean, it's true, but I think that it's, what you try to do is you try to maintain the core pillars, and the thing is that you can get too tied up in the actual, minutia and the design mechanics, and and I certainly understand that people remember the mechanics from the original game, and they know that those things have value because they led to those core experiences of the original game. But the idea is that, look, we kept the core experiences, we kept the tension, we kept the permadeath, we kept all the, turn-based squad combat, but we did change the mechanics, and it made what we think is, a better game. It's nice that the game is done, and we've all played it many times, and now we're very sort of excited to get into people's hands because it's easier to have these conversations now and say, like, yeah, we made big changes, but we know that we made the right choice. Now that we're on the other end of it, we know that we made the right choice. Now, if you had asked me, maybe a couple months after I made the change, maybe those were some long, dark nights, but now it's nice to look back and say, yeah, that was the right choice.
I'm curious, has Sid Meier personally had much involvement in this one?
Yeah, I mean, Sid's, I worked for Sid for forever. I mean, I learned design under Sid, and I've worked on all of the Sid projects at the studio. So he's he's definitely my mentor, and he's
you're Commander Riker and he's Picard.
I am, and it's the dashing beard, actually. But yeah, I mean, I'm the Riker to his Picard. I liked it. I'm gonna start using that. Yeah, I mean, I was his lieutenant for a long time, and so when I started on this project and throughout the project, I would go to him with very specific either design questions and say, look, this isn't working. Tell me what to do so I can take credit for it. And then, but he's, to his credit, I mean, he plays the game, he gives me feedback, and even to the point where he and I started out, I made the strategy layer, and it wasn't working, and so I was going to him, and he and I started by making a board game, like an actual paper board game with dice and with little characters, because we didn't want to do too much programming before we had the idea worked out. And so he and I, every afternoon for 2 weeks, we worked on this sort of board game version of the game just to make sure that the fun was there, the mechanics were there. And that was actually, that's one of my fondest memories, because as a kid, if you had told me that I was going to be making board games with Sid Meier someday.
Is that the pre-order bonus for the game? Free board game included?
I don't know. I don't know if people enjoy our terrible scribblings. And they were like these little action figures and these little dice. But yeah, I mean, he's had a really, really big hand in it, design-wise, at least from me going to him and getting feedback from him, and him just sort of jumping in and helping me out design-wise where he can. So yeah, he's a big part of it.
Are there any Easter eggs or nods to the original in there? I suspect the answer is yes.
Oh yes, the answer is definitely yes, and I'm pretty excited to see what people find, because there are some pretty cool Easter eggs in there. But yeah, definitely lots of tips of cap to the original. That's certainly important to us and fans as well.
Just two more questions I've got for you, Jake, and then I'll let you get back to actually making games as opposed to talking about them with lame media guys.
Either way is fine with me.
Are you guys planning on, because again, getting back to how I started this interview, which was, about the thought that strategy games are a bit of a tough sell for console gamers.
Sure.
Are you guys doing a playable demo at all to try and, get the game out there and give people a look at it?
I don't know that we've announced anything, but certainly, we're excited for people to get their hands on it. So that's a big mum's the word, maybe? I don't know.
Fair enough. I think we can all infer from that response.
I'm just a designer. Why are you asking me?
Well, you got to at some point. You can design a demo too, right?
That's true.
Just cut off the slice and certify it and get it out to the world. But
right.
I think we can read between the lines there. And the last question I've got for you, Jake, is when you're dealing with something as revered as XCOM, do you force the entire team to play through the original before the project starts, or even as it's going? Is there you've been working on it 4.5 years, so is there an annual playthrough of the original that's required?
Yes, when people start on the team, they do actually play the original, and it's important because you don't want to lose touch. I mean, we do, if I'm speaking seriously, we do believe in the magic of that original game, and I certainly do. I mean, that game is actually the reason I make games. I mean, that game came out my senior year of high school, and I played hundreds of hours of it, and it's the reason I got a computer science degree. It's the reason I came to Firaxis, because I was interested in strategy games. It's certainly the reason I'm making this game now, and And so I believe in that original game, and I, the team, when they start, what they do is we say, look, play the original game for a couple of days, and because they need to understand that, we can't just throw ideas at the wall. We have to be rooted in the magic of that original game. And so even when we first started on the game, the whole team played that game for a couple of weeks, and I would help them and walk them through it. And it was actually really encouraging to see even guys who, of course, had never heard of the original game, they're completely console gamers, they got into that original game, and it was nice to see that those ideas still had power 20 years later, even viewed with, you're talking like 320 by 240 resolution.
Oh, yeah.
Just a completely different game, but people were still drawn in by it. So, yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that we require people to do.
All right, well, Jake Solomon, you are the lead designer on XCOM Enemy Unknown, not the first-person shooter, the turn-based strategy game. It is out October 9th of this year. You're up against some stiff competition this holiday. Yes.
I mean, it's again, and it seems like, a couple of years ago it used to be like on-off years, but nowadays, every year, every fall, I completely run out of my gaming money, like within, you start in August, and then, like, you're way overspending by October, November. So, yeah, it's a really strong season once again.
Well, you have the advantage in this case, of not being a first-person shooter out during the holidays. You have a very different game. It is a turn-based strategy game. It's, if you're a fan of the original, odds are you've probably already pre-ordered Enemy Unknown. And if you're not, it's a thrilling, sort of riveting. You will become attached to your characters because they matter, and if they die, they're out of the game. And hopefully, we've got a playable demo coming soon that we can all try it out before it ships. And that's it. I guess you've got a game to finish, and then I trust you're taking a tropical vacation somewhere far away from the internet or any computer.
I am. It's actually sort of been winding down, so now I'm reintroducing myself to my family and making sure there aren't any strange men hanging around my house. And I'm going to take a little time off. But yeah, I cannot wait. I cannot wait for people to get their hands on the game.
Well, Jake, thank you very much, and we will all look forward to XCOM Enemy Unknown on October 9th. And in the meantime, you can actually head over to IGN.com right now. We just had one of our editors come visit you out at Firaxis, and we've got some hands-on impressions of the game posted up at IGN.com. So, Jake, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.